Hello. Okay, I guess we're going to go ahead and get started. Can you all hear me clearly?
I can hear you. This is Jackie.
Okay, so just a few things. This will be an hour-long session, and the topic will focus on payroll adjustments, tips, and tricks. This webinar will be recorded and be available by next week, along with material. At the end of each section, if there's questions, you can raise your hand, or we can address any and all questions at the end of this webinar. And if I'm not able to answer those questions, I'll follow up with some answers at the time that I provide the recording and material. Okay, so we will go ahead and get started. This agenda, or this webinar, will focus, as I mentioned, on tips and tricks on payroll adjustments, which include understanding the payroll add-ons, which will include how to add an add-on, addressing specific errors that are generated from the add-on, and understanding when it should be assigned to the employee versus an adjustment. Using the additional pay activity, and also using the additional contribution deduction activity. Now keep in mind that this webinar will not address everything about add-ons because it can be very complicated, but hopefully it'll help improve your current process and streamline things for you. So understanding add-ons. With the current setup, you'll see specific add-ons that have an asterisk at the beginning. These add-ons were provided by schoolAbility as templates. Each user can copy and edit that record and make it more specific for their organization. And this will allow for many different scenarios that are specific to that org, like account codes and so forth. There's many resources that the users can use. I am going to be providing a document for add-on overview, another document for add-on quick reference, but there's always the escape how-to, and that can be located at the top right corner of any section within the software, and this is also a hyperlink that will connect you to understanding add-ons. So let's just quickly go over where the add-ons are located. It is permission-based, so not everyone may have this section, or it may be read-only. So within HR Payroll, it's located within Setup, Payroll, and Add-ons. As I had mentioned, there's some add-ons with the asterisk. So if I sort by description, they'll sort to the top of the list. So some common recommendations that I have when you're creating add-ons is you want to establish an add-on ID naming scheme to allow for grouping and quicker access for data input. And this will make more sense when we start working with the additional pay activity. And what that means is, I'll give you a couple of examples with this particular org. This org has more add-ons related to coaching. So what I chose to do is the naming scheme for all the assistant coaches start with A, C, and then H stands for high school. So that way they're grouped together. Then we'll have some other groupings of bus drivers. So they start with BUS, docs, we have game duties, and then we have head coaches. So these are just some examples that you can follow, or you can establish your own naming scheme. Some other tips to follow is when you're creating an add-on, there's a from date. You want to use the first date of the current month to allow the user to re-edit the field if corrections need to be made after you save and close. Otherwise, all the fields will be locked and you'll have to end that record and copy a new one. So what that means is when you're creating a new record, so this one has a July date. So if I open this record, all the fields are going to be locked. So, or the fields that that I can not change will be locked. These other ones I can change, like enter an end date or change the description here or on the check. However, if it has a date in February, since that's the month where we are in, so I'll look at this one, the fields will remain open to allow me to edit and make any corrections as needed. The check, anytime that you make a change to an add-on, I always recommend checking that add-on in the adjust page to make sure it works as expected. And we'll go over those things on some examples that we're gonna go over today. I do always recommend entering in the account codes when possible to prevent user error. And this then allows to have more add-ons created because they are very specific. Then the other thing is that the user should identify when it's best to assign the add-on to the employee versus adding it within the adjust pay or additional pay screen. And we'll cover some of those examples later on. When you're entering dates, when assigning it to the employee, you want to make sure that you're referring back to the payroll cycles from and through date. When that way, the system will include it within the payroll that the user needs it to be included in. And what that means is in payroll cycles, I'm just going to look at the 9-month, but typically all of the payroll cycles have the same from and through date for the same pay date. So if I wanted to start an add-on on March 9th, I'm going to want to make sure I include the start date anywhere between these two dates here. And if I want to end it on March 23rd, I want to make sure I end it within these two dates here. So typically I'll choose a start date of 2/17 and ending on 3/16. And when we assign it to the employee in our example, I'll show you where that happens in the employee management screen. And then the other item is if the add-on is using the use position field, if it's set to yes, you want to make sure that that employee has an active primary position to utilize the feature of the position pay and or the account code. Otherwise, an error may generate, causing the employee to go ahead and fix it when processing payroll. And I'll show you what that field is. So here within the add-on of test 1, there is this use position. So what this allows is it pulls sometimes the pay or the account code, if any of these account codes are masked, from the employee's primary position that's assigned to them in employee management. So in this case, I have it set to no because this one is not tied to a position or linked to a position. Okay, so now I'm going to show you a couple of examples of when an add-on should be assigned to the employee. So say if you have an employee whose rate is based on credentials, and sometimes for this, where I've seen this, is if you have a substitute and they have different rates based on their credentials. It could be a high school diploma is at $10, and or if they have some kind of degree, they may get additional money for that. So it could be like $15. So each employee could have different credentials and therefore a different pay rate. So in that case, you're going to want to assign the add-on to the employee because it's specific to them. Or another reason why you'd want to assign it is if you want their pay to be distributed over multiple pay periods. And what this allows is for you to set it up at the employee record versus inputting different adjustments within the adjust pay activity or the additional pay. Or if you want the user, or if the user wants the add-on to automatically appear in adjust pay, you'll want to assign it to the employee. So in this case, I do have an add-on assigned to an employee that that has it starts in different pay periods, and then I also have another one that is prorating. So we're going to look at two different examples of an add-on to see how it needs to be set up and paid accordingly. So we're going to go ahead and come to the screen. And the two add-ons that I have is test one. This one is prorated. And the way I know it's prorated is this P stands, or this P allows for proration. And I also have it tied to a salary schedule. The next add-on is a stipend flat. And what that does is I'm telling the system that I want this amount here, $250, to be included in each pay period, but it's open to change at the employee record. And I want it to automatically, I want it to lock. So that way it appears in the employee's pay. Okay, so from here, I'm going to go to the employee record and assign it to that employee, in which I had already assigned it in preparation for this webinar. Oops. I need to go to the right org. And I think it's Samuel. Okay. So what I did is I assigned this add-on test one, so it's prorated. And here I chose that I want it prorated starting on February 1st all the way through June 30th, based on the salary schedule that was identified at the add-on level. If the add-on contained a question mark, so it allowed the user to select which cell, then I would be able to change the cell at the employee level. But since it's locked at the add-on creation, I can't make that change here. The next add-on that I included to this employee is, if you recall, I had the amount open to change. So I actually changed it to $300. And I'm saying I want it to start on 2/1 and end on 3/15. So what's going to happen is when I come to the pay cycles, it's going to start on 2/1. So it's going to start paying on 2/28 and it's going to end on 3/30. Since those were the begin and end dates. But just for this purpose, and I want to recalculate, I'm going to say I want it to end on, I'm going to change it because I want it to end on 3/15. So I'm going to put an end date of 2/28. Save and close, and save and close. And now that I made a change at the employee management record, the system will automatically recalculate payroll for me. So to check my setup, I'm going to come to payroll and adjust payroll to make sure that it was done accordingly. And that employee is 121. Click go. So from here, let's make sure that it was calculated. What I mean is make sure it's completely calculated when I made the change on the end date. So when I look at this screen, I can see that the pay has changed starting on 2/28. And for these next 3 payrolls, it's the same amount and then it changes again. So we're going to click on the pay detail salary and it gives me the full year's calculation. So from here, what I'm seeing is originally we did have a annualized salary of $5,000, but the system prorated that amount for us. Then we had an add-on that we created at $300 per pay period, and I ended it on 3/15. So that was 3 pay periods. So 3 times 300 is 900. And it gives me the effective dates here at the side, on the side. So those are 2 examples of common errors or common examples that I have received where an employee or a user wanted to add an add-on mid-year but didn't want it prorated. So therefore I showed you the example of this first one. And then just showed you another example. If it's tied to the salary schedule and has a P, it will prorate it. Okay, so now you set up your you set up your add-on and assigned it to the employee. And some common errors that I see is that the add-on is not appearing in the adjust pay. So the first thing that you're going to want to do is you're going to want to review your dates to make sure you selected the right ones and compare it to the pay cycle. Or you're going to want to review your units option. So say in this example, if I had left this add-on originally it was set to A for automatic. If I would have left that as automatic, what would have happened is in the adjust pay screen, we'll go ahead and open up this one. The units will come in at 0. And so the earnings will not appear until you input a units amount. So that's one area that you may want to look at if the salary amount or the gross wage amount isn't coming in to the adjust pay screen. So one other common error that I have seen is that you have an employee who has no wages, but does have contributions being taken out or processed within the payroll, and there is a payroll error. So we're going to look at the February 28th payroll, and we're going to look at this employee here, Haley Abeta, and we're going to look at the payroll snapshot. And what this report is showing is this employee has no wages, but she does have medical being taken out. So what the system does is it's actually going to include this deduction in the payroll liabilities, but it's not going to know how to code that. So it's not going to actually record a journal entry. So in order to process this, you're going to want to include a Ben-only add-on. So I'm going to come and click on the contribution and to add it. What the Ben-only add-on allows is it's a benefit only, and it allows you to input an account code. Oops, I didn't mean to click on that one. I meant to click on the add-on. Delete. I don't want that. Cancel. Haley, and I want the add-on. Okay, so I'm going to click new, and I'm going to click Ben only, and I'm going to input the account code that I want for this employee to record that contribution. I'm just choosing that account code. Okay, so I'm going to click close. And now I'm going to look at that employee payroll, this payroll snapshot. And so I have this Ben only. And so now what the system allows for is for that benefit to be charged. Make it bigger for you. And what it also did is it cleared the error. So I no longer have that error for that payroll, for that employee. Okay, so we went over a couple of examples of some add-ons that can help clear up some errors. Are there any questions about some add-ons? This And like I said, this was not to explain every different scenario of the add-ons, but just to give you some information to help streamline or understand the add-ons a little bit better with some common errors or some common add-ons that users may create. Okay, so now we're going to go on to the next one, additional pay. So additional pay activity is designed for quick data entry in a batch environment. And some examples that users will utilize this for is for substitutes, overtime, additional hours, or pay docs. So the way that this process works is the user will create the batch, they'll input the data, they'll submit the batch, and post the batch. The additional pay is located within employment and then additional pay, or you can also type in ADPY in the screen and it takes you directly to that activity. There's different ways that a user can create a batch. You can create it from scratch, you can copy templates, or you can import. So to create from scratch, you just click on New and it creates it from scratch. Or we can have one already available and you can copy this template and make changes to the data. Or there is the option for importing, which we're going to cover in just a little bit. So when we're creating a batch, the first tab is the batch info screen. This batch info screen allows the user to identify the pay date and what primary pay cycle will be defaulted. So what that means is the primary pay cycle, if that's set to yes, it will use the employee's primary pay cycle. But if you select no, it will default to whatever is identified here. This default will also apply to employees whose primary pay cycle does not exist. And where I've seen this handy is at the beginning of the year, say in July, you have summer school and you have teachers who are needing to get paid, but their primary pay cycle doesn't start until August. So in that case, you can select no and identify the pay cycle that you want those employees to be paid on and then select that pay date. So that way it forces the employees to be pulled into that payroll record. Okay, so then now for the data entry, this is an example of one that has already been created. Here within the screen, these are the different columns going across, which like any other screen can be sorted. The first entry that you're going to include is the employee. So in this employee field, you can enter the ID, you can enter the name, which are the first two letters of the last name, and you click F4 or the down arrow, or you can enter the last four digits of the social security number. Then you're going to click on the add-on, select it, you'll input the units, you'll input the effective date. Depending on the add-on setup, this is where the rest of the information will come in. Sometimes the add-on will have the rate automatically identified. The description does populate automatically from the add-on setup. However, it can be changed. Just a caution that if you do change the description, if it's not the same description as what the user or what the employee is getting on the paycheck, that employee will have multiple records appear on their payroll register. So my recommendation is you just keep it the same. Then the account code may be overridden within this screen. You may also include a different pay cycle that's different from the batch info pay cycle default. Sometimes if the add-on includes question marks in the setup, you may have to select a schedule cell here. So now let's take a look at what that looks like in the system. So like I said, it's here with an HR payroll and additional pay. From here, you can select new, or we can look at what's already available in the system. And in that case, I already have one or two that have been posted. This one I named timesheet template. So say, for example, you have individuals who get paid, or you have to input hours every pay period. You can automatically select or create those employees within this batch and copy this batch each pay period and input the units and effective date. So we're going to go ahead and do that. So I'm going to click on copy. We're going to use a pay date of 03/15. We're going to say this is test 2. And I'm going to use the primary pay cycle as yes. And I'm going to select the 9-month. And we're going to pay them on 3/15. From here, you'll click Save and Close. You'll reopen. You click on the Employees tab. Notice we have 5 records. So from here, I can start entering in the number of hours and input an effective date. I'm going to say the 28th because that's the last day of that pay period that's going to be paid on 3/15. And notice I'm only entering in 28. So the system knows that this is February, so it automatically fills in the February, the number 2, and then the year, 2018. So as you can see, this allows for a quicker input of the hours in a batch setting. Okay, I'm done inputting. At this point, I can click Tasks and Submit. Reopen the record, Tasks, and Post add-on. What this allows for is when it says post, it means that it actually is included in the Adjust Payroll screen. So if I come to the Adjust Payroll screen and I'm selecting, I forgot what date I selected. Oops, open this record, pay date 3/15. Okay, so 3/15, click Go. And I can actually, if you notice here, I have this batch number 40999. I can select that batch number 40999. And it pulls up the employees that I inputted hours for. So I can come here on the detail and click on add-on. And that employee will have those units automatically entered. Okay, so now that was one example of creating an additional pay batch. The other example that you can do is if you click, if you click new, you'll input the information and then you'll just start creating them from scratch. But there is another option for an import. So like any other template that is available within online resources, templates, and then you click on the additional pay import. And that's where I just I went ahead and downloaded it, but I also included a snapshot of what that data file looks like, and I gave you some rules to follow when you're importing the file. Sometimes it may be quicker to use an import if you have a large batch and you're just having to copy and paste, but it does require you to identify the employee. So you'll have to enter either a social or an employee ID number. And I showed you how to post. But say you made a mistake and it was on multiple employees, not just one. If it's on multiple employees, you can always roll back. So to do that, you open up this record, you click on tasks and roll back. And it opens the record for you. And you can make the changes, or you can even add. And then once you make your corrections, you can click task and post again. Or another option is you can always make your change within the Adjust Payroll screen. So from here, you can either click open the record and make the change from this area. And say it should have been 15. I can make the change here. And save and close. But if you notice, that took a little while to open up the record. So another quick way is just clicking on detail and add on. And you can make the change here. Oops. Yeah, it's 15. Close. Okay, so that was the section on additional pay. I think it's actually a quicker way to input timesheets or additional time. And it could actually streamline the process for the user when processing payroll. Are there any questions? Okay, we're gonna go ahead and move on to additional contrib deduct. Now this one is similar to the additional pay. It's in a batch setting. The only difference is you do have to create a batch separately for contributions and deductions. As you can see this screen, the batch info screen is similar to the additional pay activity. It follows the same rules. And it's in a batch setting just like the additional pay. And like I mentioned before, if you change the description, it will create that deduction or that adjustment separately. So if you notice here, I didn't add the ADJ at the end. So therefore, it will include it with the original deduction. But if you add something different to the description, it will separate it out. So let's go ahead and look at that activity. It's right above the additional pay. I'm going to go ahead and look at what I have already posted. So from here, I'm going to go ahead and roll back. It offers that same feature. If you make a mistake, you can make the change here or in the additional pay screen. So say here I wanted to actually add a new deduction. And I want this to be a reimbursement or a refund. to this employee for $200. So I therefore enter as a negative. And that was the only change that I needed to make. So you can add as many records as needed, just like I showed you. So from here, I'm going to go ahead and post. And this one was for a pay date of 2/28. So we're going to go ahead and look at this batch, 39951 for 2/28. $39951. And it'll give us the employees who were included within that batch. So from here, I can look at the employee, the payroll snapshot, and verify. So I know that this was one of them because it does have that asterisk. Another option is you can import. So if I click new, from here, you can select the file to import. And just like the additional pay template that is available from the template section here to the side, and it's contrib deduct import. And I also have included a snapshot of what that looks like and gave you some rules to follow. Where I've seen that this comes in handy is, say an organization did not have enough time to process the voluntary life deductions for a school because they had a payroll that happened before they got the information. So the next payroll, they had multiple adjustments that needed to take place. They could do an import and quickly collect from those employees for the under collection or over collection for the first payroll of that month. And as I showed you before, this is how you post, but if you make a mistake, you can always roll back. Now, for you to review, I showed you how to review each employee, but you can also review all of the changes that you made from the Pay 13 report. And this is an example of that. It includes any deduction changes or contribution changes, and it also includes earning adjustments, not changes, they're adjustments. So this is a quick way to review the data entry within those activities. Okay, and that wraps up my overview of add-ons, additional pay, and the additional contrib deduct. Are there any questions? Okay, well, hopefully these sessions are going to be helpful to users to help streamline or answer any questions for them. And we want to make sure that these are helpful to the users. So if you can, please provide us with some topics. I'm hoping to get the topics released on Monday. And so we'll, if there are no topics then that are submitted or provided to us, then we'll go ahead and identify what they are based on support calls. Okay, that wraps up this webinar. Thank you.
Thanks, Jolene.
Thank you.
Yep. Thanks, Julian. Ciao.